widen your borders and you'll desire to eat meat, you should eat meat. It says in this week's Torah portion. So it sounds like until they got to Israel, no one ate meat. So there's actually an argument in the Gemara in Chulin, on page 16a, what the rules were in the desert. According to Rabbi Yishmael, they were actually forbidden to eat meat the whole time they were in the desert. And only when they arrived in Israel were they allowed to eat meat. According to Rabbi Akiva, they were allowed to eat meat before. But the Torah says when they came to Israel, they had a new commandment, and the commandment was they had to start shechting the animals. The prohibition of shechting, that an animal is only kosher if it's properly slaughtered, that's what began in Israel. But before, they were allowed to eat. But they were also allowed to eat non-sacrifices. According to Rabbi Shmuel, while they were in the desert, all they could eat were sacrifices. They couldn't eat regular meat. So, how does Rabbi Shmuel interpret the verse, Ki yarech Hashem Elokecha Zbucha, Hashem will widen your borders, then you'll be able to eat meat? Understands that when your borders are widened, meaning when you come to Israel, then you are allowed to eat meat. When it means a literal sense that you'll have more land, Hashem will give you the land of Israel, then you're allowed to eat meat. So the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, that even in the desert they're allowed to eat meat. And Rashi does, in Chumash, Rashi mentions the opinion of both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Rashi says that when the Torah says that you will come to Eretz Yisrael, Hashem will widen your borders, you'll eat meat. Rashi says you're forbidden to eat meat the whole time you're in the desert. While you're in the desert, the only thing you could eat were sacrifices. Shalom, when you offer a sacrifice to Hashem, then you could eat meat. Rashi also brings the explanation of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Elazar ben Azariah, and by the way, Rashi is able to go back and forth between different opinions, even though one is not the halacha, because Rashi's role in Chumash is not to give us the halacha. Rashi's role in Chumash is to tell us the meaning of the verses of the Torah. So what does the Torah say about eating meat? Or says Rashi, a person should only eat meat when they are wealthy and they have lots of money, matnas hadayim. So when Hashem is widening your borders, that means when you're in a state of comfort. So Rashi brings both translations of widening borders. Both it means on a personal level, when you have wealth, and Rashi brings another explanation, the simple translation, when your borders will be widened in the simple sense, you'll come to Israel. So we need to understand the connection between these two ideas. It seems like from Rashi that coming to Israel and having a larger real estate, if you will, Hashem has given us land in Israel, and being wealthy on a personal level are both connected to this idea of eating meat. And only if you're in Israel and you're wealthy, then you should eat meat. What does that mean? So there's a difference between the spiritual state the Jewish people were in while they were in Israel, while they were in the desert, versus when they came to Israel. On the surface, the desert, they were on a much higher plane. They had the manna bread from heaven, they had the water from Rock Miriam. They had no material concerns. The only concerns were spiritual. They learned Torah directly from Moshe Rabbeinu. Every week, they were just learning new mitzvahs from Hashem. So they were at a very high place spiritually. Versus when they came to Israel, they suddenly had to plow and plant the land, and they had to eat. Each person had to earn their own livelihood. And everyone was, it seems, on a much lower spiritual level once they came to Israel, because they no longer had this magical oasis of Hashem protecting them and guiding them. And so on the surface, they're going to descend a lot spiritually when they come to Israel. And that's why the spies said, we don't want to go to Israel. Eretz Achas Yishrahi, they said. It's a land that consumes its inhabitants. What they meant was spiritually. This is a land that will take away our spirituality. This is a land that will lower us. We don't want to go to Israel. We don't want to be involved in in working the land physically, because this will bring us down. What's the truth? The truth is that although on the surface they're right, but the truth is that going to Israel was actually a step up, not a step down. When God gave us the Torah, it says in the Talmud that the angels came to God and they said, why give the Torah to human beings? Give the Torah to us and have it to the angels. So God told Moshe Rabbeinu to respond to them. What did he say to them? He said, does it say in the Torah, what does it say in the Torah? It says in the Torah, I am Lord your God, took you out of Egypt. Have you ever been to Egypt? It says in the Torah, honor your father and mother. Do you have a father and mother? It says in the Torah, don't pray to other gods. Are you living among nations of the world who pray to other gods? The God needs to tell you not to worship idols, not to swear by the name of other gods. What's your connection to the Torah? So the whole point of giving the Torah was to give the Torah to us here in the physical world. The Torah is about the physical world. Why? Because God's desire is to have a home in the lowest realm. Hashem wants a home here in the physical world. And since the desire of Hashem is to have a home in the physical world, that's the deepest desire of Hashem in creation. He wants a home here physically. So when they came to Israel, it wasn't they went to a lower, to do something lower, they went to do something higher. They went to achieve something that Hashem really wants. They went to achieve Hashem's greatest desire. There were 40 years between getting the Torah and going to Israel. And they were involved in the physical world at some level. They were able to make a home for Hashem at some level. They were able to elevate some things in the physical world. They were able to eat sacrifices. They were able to eat holy meat. They were able to do holy things and elevate the parts of the world which were more refined and holier. And that's why they were not allowed to eat regular meat just because you wanted to eat. You couldn't eat meat. They couldn't because they didn't have the power to elevate regular meat. So they were connected at that time to a lower level of holiness, a more limited level of holiness, a more contracted level of holiness, a limited light of Hashem, a more limited light of Hashem, and therefore they weren't able to traverse the gap of elevating the lower parts of the world. However, the Torah says, when God will widen your borders, the emphasis is when He'll widen your borders. There are many different times that the Torah describes our arrival to Israel. It doesn't always use the expression of widening borders. But here specifically the Torah says when Hashem will widen your borders. Why does Hashem use that expression? Because in order to be able to elevate the lower parts of the physical world, they needed Hashem to give them more strength, more energy. So ki yarcha Hashem kechas gulcha means that Hashem will widen your borders, Hashem will give you more strength, more power, higher spiritual light that will enable you to achieve Hashem's ultimate purpose in creation, to elevate the lowest part of the physical world. So that's why it says that only in Israel were they allowed to eat meat, because only in Israel did they have this broader, higher, deeper spiritual energy that would allow them to elevate the physical. And they were even able to eat meat when they just wanted meat. What does that mean? It seems like it's a low thing. You eat when you eat meat because it's a sacrifice to God. Okay, so it's part of your service of Hashem. But when you eat meat just because you want to eat meat, why is that? Why is that part of the service of Hashem at all? And why is it connected to an additional spiritual energy and elevating? What are we even saying? Doesn't Torah? When you want to eat meat, you can eat meat. The words in Torah are Kisab and nafshecha lechol basar. When you desire to eat meat, all the desires of yourself, you should eat meat. That's what the Torah says. So it sounds like you want to eat it, eat it. It's about you, because I want to eat. I'm not eating it because I'm supposed to eat it. I'm eating because I want to eat it. So it's not about being elevated, being spiritual, being deeper, elevating the physical. It's about me wanting to eat it. That's what it sounds like. So the answer is, the Baal Shem Tov says, it says in the Torah, in Tehillim chapter 107, it says, Re'evim gam tzemeim, they were hungry, they were thirsty. Nafshem bem tasataf, their soul is wrapped within. So Baal Shem Tov says, when a Jew is hungry, a Jew is thirsty. Why are we hungry and thirsty? We think we're hungry and thirsty because we like the food. It says Baal Shem Tov, you should know, and the reason why you're hungry and thirsty is because your neshama is hungry. Your soul wants to have the divine spark which is in the food. Your soul wants the godly spark. Nafshem, but the satav, their soul is wrapped within, refers to the soul of the physical food. There's a godly spark, there's a soul in the physical food. And your soul desires the spark of Hashem in the physical food. Your soul wants to connect with and to elevate and to absorb this godliness in the food. So I feel a hunger, I feel I want to eat meat. So but really my soul wants meat. That's what the Torah is hinting to in the words of the Torah. When your soul desires to eat meat. The Torah is saying to you, you may think it's just you, your body who wants to eat meat. Says the Baal Shem Tov, the Torah is telling you, really what's going on is your neshama yearns to eat meat. Now it doesn't mean, obviously, that you're just supposed to eat for the sake of pleasure. Whatever a Jew does is supposed to be for the sake of Hashem. All your deeds should be for the sake of Hashem, and more. The Torah says, in all your ways you should know Him. So it doesn't mean to eat it for the sake of enjoyment. What it means is that when a person is hungry, not just you have a whim, you want to do this because it's there, because you already ate the chicken, and then you decided to move over to the knishes, and the knishes were just a little south of the meat, like I did last night. So then, yes, that was the order. First it was the chicken, then the knishes, then the meat. Yeah, so that's not what Hashem is talking. Hashem is talking about when you're hungry. Why you're hungry is because your neshama wants something. It's possible that there are things in your life that you shouldn't be having, right? And just listening to a student of Rabbi Khan describing Rabbi Khan, how unbelievable, how kind of lack of interest he had in all physical things. Even when Rebbe was talking about how Rabbi has a higher mission and he's not doing it, it was spoken about it publicly, and Rabbi had such self-effacement. So after Rebbe spoke, he had to repeat Rebbe's words. So he would also repeat the parts about himself. And there's a guy and he's doing A, B, and C, but even when Rebbe was criticizing him and saying how he's supposed to work on the Sefer Erchem, he's supposed to work on the encyclopedia of Chassidic thought, and Rebbe spoke about the challenge that he has, and it's a challenge similar to Adam's challenge. It was a huge challenge that Adam had, the tree of knowledge, and so too. Anyways, but at the same time, Rebbe was criticizing him. Rebbe said that we're talking about a person who has no interest at all in the physical things at all. He has no interest in the physical, and we're talking about a person who has no selfish motives at all. A person has no selfish motives. And yet, this is a challenge for him. I already started talking about Rabbi. Someone just add another word. Rabbi was going through a hard time, 1965. He didn't have children, and there was a time that he came to the Rebbe by farbrengen and asked for bracha for children, and the Rebbe said to him something like, "You're deilu mashke, that I can't help you, basically, and your role is to be deilu mashke." It says about Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, he took from the teachings of Abraham and he fed everyone else the teachings of Abraham. That's what his role is. It wasn't his role to have an offspring, a biological offspring. But really, what we're learning now is something that I learned from him. And anyways, going back to the subject. So when the Torah says that you will desire to eat meat, you should eat meat. It's talking about. It says in the Torah, your soul desires to eat meat. It's talking about your neshama being hungry. It's not just you're having a desire or something. So Rabbi, someone's describing how he was staying in his house for a week, and after a week he still didn't know where the bathroom was. He was eating soup, and he was having trouble eating the soup, and he couldn't figure out why he was having trouble eating the soup. Why was he having trouble eating the soup? Because he was using a fork. And it wasn't like he was trying to do a thing. It wasn't like he was like proud of his his. He was like embarrassed, turned red, like, oh, what did I do? Like but he was totally not into it. Anyways, so
how he like caught on to Rabbi's energy.
Huh? Rabbi was eating.
Rabbi
was trying to eat soup with a fork.
Nice.
He was embarrassed about it. Whatever. Anyways, but so a Jew like him, of course, when he's hungry to eat something, right? That's his soul, which is yearning for the godly sparks. And we have a whim to eat something else. That's not necessarily our soul yearning for anything. When we're hungry, yeah, that means your neshama wants the sparks of Hashem, and that physical food. You, as a person, as learned yesterday in Hayom Yom, that the Rebbe Rashab taught the previous Rebbe the Tanya, and he told him, when he got to the words, the soul of a Jew is an actual part of God, and said the Rebbe Rashab that on the one hand, the soul is very, very spiritual. It's above, it comes from the highest level of holiness. On the other hand, it has an effect in the most down-to-earth way. So I'm hungry because my neshama wants to spark Hashem. That's real. That's actually me, not just Rabbi Yel. That's everybody. That's when you're hungry. So that's the Torah is telling us that we need to eat for the right reasons. We need to be conscious of what our neshama wants, and that should be that should be the narrative in our mind. We should think that this is why we need to eat, and that's the purpose of eating.
Is this a good time to ask a question, or should I wait?
Go ahead.
I'm a little confused. If we go back to the meat bar, and we have two different opinions here, one by Rabbi Shmuel, one by Rabbi Akiva.
Yeah.
If we hold by Rabbi Shmuel that it makes sense why we didn't eat the cattle that we had, the flocks that we had. If we hold by Rabbi Akiva, it sounds like we were a bunch of cheapskates. But now you're adding the dimension that when we said we wanted meat, and before Hashem brought the slav, when we were demanding it, it was coming from a spiritual place, or was it coming from a physical place?
That's an interesting question. I don't know what Chassidic says about that question. It's a good question. But I will say this. When the Jews left...
It's got to be bad, because they got punished for it, and they shoved the slum down. And it wasn't like, hey, can I get one or two slubs? Hashem gave them like a monsoon of slubs.
Listen, how about this? When the Jewish people were told by Hashem they can't go to Israel, and they had to stay in the desert 40 years, and some Jews, they ventured out of the cloud, right? They ventured out to go, we're going to go to Israel. They weren't ready to go to Israel, but they were going to go to Israel anyways. So it says in Tanya, on the one hand, that was their desire to go to Israel, and they saying, we believe in Hashem, we're going to go to Israel. There was some soul in that too. The fact that they believed in Hashem, and they were ready to go to Israel, a moment before, like, no, we can't go to Israel, it's impossible, they're too big. And then they're like, no, we can go to Israel. So there was some soul in that as well. There's some faith in God. Even though Moshe told them that Hashem doesn't want them to do this, and Hashem said no, but there was some faith, and there was some Yitzhar there as well. Yitzhar was, I don't care what Hashem says right now, I'm ready to go, I changed, I'm different. Hashem said, no, you can't go. So it could be that the Jews who desired meat in the desert, that there's also some kind of convoluted Jewish thinking there as well. We want the meat, there's the soul, the spirit, I don't know. But the bottom line is, they didn't have the power to do it. And that's the answer also to the Yonatan, how the two interpretations of Rashi are connected. Rashi says it means when you come to Israel. Rashi also says when you become wealthy. When Rashi says wealthy, it doesn't mean physically wealthy. Rashi, it says in the Talmud, Ein ani el badas, ein asher el badas. There's no one who is poor except someone who's poor in knowledge, and no one who's rich except for someone who's rich in knowledge. So when someone's obsessed and interested in the physical, considering them, the Talmud says, Am ha'aretz aslach habasar. And an ignoramus cannot eat meat. Doesn't mean someone who doesn't know Gemara. Ignoramus means Am ha'aretz means a person who's earthy. If we're earthy, if we're into the physical, so then we're not going to elevate the meat, we're going to bring it down. That's why in Hebrew the word for permissible or forbidden is mutter or asr. What's mutter mean? Mutter means untied. What's asr mean? Tied. Tied means that it's unable to be elevated. Mutter means it's possible to be elevated. But I don't want to ruin your week, but I'll tell you what Tzemach Tzedek says anyways. Because maybe it's not ruining it, it's giving us direction. Tzemach Tzedek says that having a taiva, having a desire for something, means that there's some kind of blockage in your heart and mind. But indulging in things which are extra is kares. Means your soul's cut off from Hashem. Why? Because it basically means that you're just not interested. You're just not interested. You're not interested in Hashem. You're interested. Okay, let's go back to this.
All right, so you loophole it and you call it a farbrengen.
Sounds like a plan. That's farbrengen. That's what we're doing, right? Anyways, so
are there other places where the Rebbe is holding by Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shmuel, and he's talking about the subject?
So here we're having both interpretations. When you come to Israel, and when you personally are in a state of Israel, in a state of broaden your state of spiritual wealth. There are some things that you could elevate because of your heightened knowledge and awareness and depth, and therefore you're able to elevate other things that other people can't. So Torah is saying that because of you being in an Israel-like state with the rich understanding of Hashem and Torah and chassidus, therefore you're able to elevate things which another person wouldn't have the wherewithal to bring it up, or would bring them down. That's why it says the main time to eat breakfast is after davening, because after you daven and the neshama is now spreading your body, now it's possible for you to engage in the physical world and elevate. Before davening, it's the opposite. The physical brings you down. So Rashi connects these two things. Rashi says, you come to Israel, you're going to engage the physical world, you're able to fulfill God's purpose in creation, elevate the physical world. More, you're wealthy, you're wealthy in knowledge, then that's a time that Hashem empowers you and charges you to engage not just with the higher part of the physical world, but the lower part of the physical world. In other words, the more we have spiritually, the lower that we need to go, we're able to go. Let's conclude with this. It says in the Mishnah, Az panim li gehenim b'shus panim laganei. It says a person who's arrogant goes to hell, and a person who has shame goes to heaven. So B'chanim Arazav said the word Az panim also means someone who has a strong integrity, strong inwardness. Panim means inside. Az means strong. If you boishas panim, an embarrassing inwardness, means your inside isn't so rosy. So as panim legehenim, if you have a strong inner core, then you can handle going to the hell of a spiritual place which is devoid of spirituality. But if you're only have an embarrassing, if your inner core is embarrassing, so then you got to stay in Kansas, Dorothy. You're not much you could be able to elevate. But present company, Reb Zev, Reb Yonatan, Dr. Bressman, listen, look where Hashem sent us. Sent us to Los Angeles, to Atlanta. Adam's going to Florida today. It shows that we must have this incredible theme. Hashem gave us a unique strength that wasn't given generations before. It must be that Hashem gave us a special power that we're able to live through a Gimel Tammuz, live through consumed godliness. That shows that we have a special power of Hashem that was never given before to finish the exile and make Mashiach come. Let's see it happen today. Chaim Rafa. Any questions? All right. Tigers and Kultuf.